So what is this World War III game that people keep talking about? How can I play it, and is it really a competitor to the Battlefield franchise? Hey guys, LevelCap here, and today we're jumping back into World War III after spending quite some time away from it. And that's right, back into World War III. You might have just heard about this game, but the first time I played this game was an early access event at Gamescom back in 2018, almost 4 years ago. At that time, Battlefield 5 was getting ready to launch, and the developers of World War III, the Farm 51, had their game perfectly positioned to fill the void that Battlefield 4 had left in the arcadey, modern military shooter genre. World War III offered large maps, tons of players, and even vehicle gameplay in a package that at first glance really looked similar to a Battlefield game. In fact, the devs were not shy about hiding their Battlefield inspiration, so immediately Battlefield fans became interested in the project. And certainly back in 2018, the game was visually very impressive and did for the most part replicate an experience reminiscent of an official Battlefield game. However, back then it also suffered from performance issues, bugs, and a visual style that I jokingly called 50 Shades of Grey. Visually it looked realistic, but it had no flair and rendered gray cities on gray rainy days. Now the game did manage to launch with around 11,000 concurrent players on Steam, but quickly dropped off due to game issues. Not to mention its matchmaking system kicked you out after every round, forcing you to rejoin and refill servers, which was a major chore. Its first major update didn't come until March of 2019, which did boost player counts and interest for about a month, but then interest dropped off again as the game's underlying issues likely pushed players away. After that, the game more or less died off without having enough players to fill servers regularly. However, in April of 2020, the Farm 51 announced a partnership with My.Games. The deal provided the developers with more resources, support, and funding. It also meant that the game would ultimately go from a paid title to a free-to-play one and launch on the My.Games store. The announcement came right after the developers were announcing a major update and improvements were in the works, but they also chose to remove World War III from sale on Steam in August of the same year. After that, they went almost entirely silent on development updates until September 2021, when they announced a veteran alpha for the game. And the alpha was a pretty substantial overhaul for the game. It refreshed the UI, maps, weapons, and more. A closed beta launched the following month, and so far more maps have been updated, and a major overhaul of the audio was also recently released. An open beta was originally planned for this month, and the devs have been doing public playtests leading up to it. However, those playtests have been tough going, with critical issues popping up like players being unable to matchmake into servers. At the moment, there isn't a roadmap available for the open beta or retail launch phases of development. More maps and weapons might be in the works, as the devs have been asking for more map ideas on social media over the past few months, but they haven't announced anything concrete. The map overhauls that they've done so far have been pretty dramatic improvements. Fidelity and atmosphere have been massively improved, and the layouts have been reworked for better flow and objective play. Plus, there is a ton more cover. Now, if you want to play the game right now, you can buy a closed beta pack for $15. There's also a tiered investment for the game if you want more cosmetics or weapon attachments unlocked, and that goes all the way up to a crazy price of $300 for the major pack. A bit aggressive if you ask me, especially considering that the whole game is planned to go free to play, but I guess it's just there if you want to support the developers if you really believe in the project. Now, from my experience jumping back into the game, some of the nicer upgrades have been the map overhauls. There's way more atmospheric details and, most importantly, cover. The first iteration of the game was pretty barren, making it a nightmare to cross large open areas. This time around, though, cover is far more plentiful. The servers also roll over into new modes, so you don't have to rematch all the time. The performance is much better as well, though the in-game FPS counter didn't actually feel accurate to my experience. I was supposedly getting godlike FPS, but it certainly didn't feel that buttery smooth, so it's possible that my FPS counter was hooked on the UI refresh rate or something like that. Now, as far as the overall experience goes, it's an interesting game that sort of takes the Battlefield formula but puts it into a much faster TTK package. And if you're a fan of some of the more hardcore modes from past Battlefield games, it might appeal to you. It also has score streaks more or less identical to what Call of Duty offers, where you can call in UAVs, airstrikes, or even tanks. The vehicles are quite powerful and, in all honesty, not particularly fun to play against. Perhaps I need to play more and unlock some more powerful anti-armor weapons, cause I just wasn't really feeling it with my RPG. The gameplay also changes significantly depending on the maps you're playing. Some maps are more lane driven with predictable areas of cover, making for decent firefights and engagement zones. Others are more open with tons of windows and angles to worry about. This often made it difficult and unfun for me to push out across the map, as it greatly rewarded people for just camping in windows. The game also has a somewhat realistic armor system, where shooting center mass can actually be bad in that your shots will do reduced damage because you'll be hitting their armored plates. The same goes for helmets, which can be shot off, but while they're on, they will greatly reduce headshot damage. And I would imagine this appeals a lot to people who are more interested in simulating a more realistic sense of modern combat, but it can also make for a somewhat inconsistent firefight experience. Most of the time though, you're probably going to be dead before you even have time to turn around and face your enemy, let alone return fire. I actually found myself enjoying the TDM experience significantly more than the larger conquest style modes, because in TDM the combat could be controlled considerably better. My shooter skills translated much better to in-game performance, but when switching into the larger modes, it became clear that the map knowledge and score streaks played a much larger role than, say, aim and reaction time. And I think that's largely due to the crazy fast TTK, making it often impossible to recover from some sort of mistake. Now, that more punishing style of FPS combat is certainly not for everyone. I enjoy games like Squad for the sim-like experience, but I also get frustrated by the map knowledge and learning curve, where my shooter skills don't really mean much until you know how to navigate properly or just when to hide in a building. Right now, the game kind of feels like a halfway point between, say, Squad and Battlefield, and I'm not sure if that's even totally intentional. The game looks and borrows so much from Battlefield that jumping in, you almost expect it to play like Battlefield. Plus, it kind of has this arcadey style UI and Call of Duty like score streaks, so you even more expect the gameplay to be arcade-like, but then it hits you with a brutally punishing TTK and tons of angles, forcing you to slow down and take your time. Now, the biggest improvement about World War III right now is that it's just a much more competent game than it was back in 2018. The performance is better, it's way less buggy, and it's actually in a state where refinement and combat flow can be worked on as the primary focus. I certainly want to play it a bit more and see if I can get a better feel for the game. It still has a bit of clunky UI, especially regarding customizing weapons, which I don't think you can do in-game right now, but you have to do it in between rounds, and the player movement doesn't feel too great overall, especially in maps with uneven hilly terrain. But I am curious to see how some of the higher level weapons and attachments work and balance in-game. I certainly think there's a possibility for this game to carve out its own niche in the FPS world, but it doesn't feel like a replacement for Battlefield if that's what you're expecting. It's an adjacent experience. You're not going to get epic, crazy moments like you might in Battlefield or see tanks and helicopters regularly fighting it out. Instead, you're going to get more tactical and intense infantry firefights in a more realistic looking modern setting. And frankly, that might be exactly what many gamers want. I look forward to tracking the progress of this game, especially once it makes the full conversion to a free-to-play model. As always, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know if you've been playing World War III or if you're thinking about checking it out in the comments down below. And as always, I'll see you next time. This is Level Cap, signing off.